I have the honor of serving as the moderator for our town hall meeting for secondary families. We have planned this meeting to be an opportunity for staff to respond to questions, share information and resources, and learn from our parents and community members. We greatly appreciate you joining us. I would now like to welcome and invite our board chair, Ms. Julie Henn, and Superintendent Dr. Darrell Williams to share some welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Zarchin. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of my colleagues on the Board of Education of Baltimore County, I want to thank you for joining us this evening for this important conversation on school safety. We know that safe and supportive environments set the foundation for high-quality teaching and learning. We also know we need our communities as partners for this important work. We want parents and guardians to understand that while the school system can and does take swift action to address student behaviors, we do not act alone. We are part of a system of schools guided by laws, policies, and practices. Even more importantly, we are part of a school community invested in the success of our students. My fellow board members and I value your voice and look forward to continued conversation about how we work together to ensure our schools are safe, supportive places for our students to learn and grow. Dr. Williams?
Thank you, Ms. Henn, and welcome Team BCPS community to our town hall. Last school year, we held 4 town hall conversations on school safety. We heard from you, Team BCPS, about your concerns, questions, and challenges, and we shared information about our work to address student behaviors and enhance supports to schools. Much work has been done by the system and school leaders to ensure that all students feel good about themselves, their school environments, and their ability to learn. So I know how frustrating it is for our students, staff, and members of the community to receive notifications from the schools or see yet another news story about an altercation at a school. However, these news stories or community letters do not give the full picture of the work school leaders do to support student safety and a positive culture. The vast majority of our 111,000 students come to school each day ready to learn. They engage with their peers and staff in a positive manner and follow the rules in and out of the school building. However, the reality is there are a small number of our students who make poor choices and choose to engage in disruptive and dangerous behaviors. So let me be clear. Any behavior that creates a hostile school environment, disrupts learning and school activities, or negatively interferes with a student's academic, psychological, social, or physical well-being will not be tolerated. There's a narrative in the community that we are not holding students accountable for their behaviors. That simply is not true. Violent and aggressive behavior has resulted in suspension from school and the bus. We are taking action. But I would be remiss if I didn't state that this issue requires our parents, guardians, students, and community stepping up and also saying enough is enough. The behaviors we model at home and the values we instill in our children have a tremendous impact on the schoolhouse. Many of these issues are stemming from the community and spilling over into our school buildings. This is not something the school system can address alone. We're calling on the community to help. Our school buildings are open. We invite you to volunteer to support before school, during lunch, or after school. It makes a difference to our students to see parents, community organizations, and business leaders invested in their success. So this summer, we shared expectations for behavior in schools and on buses with Team BCPS. Schools reviewed these expectations with all students, and families were asked to sign off to confirm understanding. This fall, we also shared additional information on safety enhancements. We've strengthened our processes and rules and deployed additional support to schools. And we're seeing the impact of this work. Any student who endangers the safety of others by acting in a manner that is not representative of school system values receives serious consequences aligned with the BCPS student handbook and state regulations. Student privacy laws prohibit the sharing of specific details about student consequences, but the community should be assured that students are held accountable. We ask for your partnership in ensuring that dangerous, prohibited, and inappropriate items are not brought on BCPS property. Students who fail to meet behavior expectations will be subject to serious school and legal consequences. We all have a role in ensuring that schools remain safe and secure learning environments. So thank you for partnering with us as we work together to support student success. So at this time, I turn it back over to Dr. Zarchin.
Thank you, Dr. Williams, and thank you, Chair Henn. Joining us tonight, we have Dr. Candace Taylor, Safety Manager, Ms. Kim Ferguson, Executive Director, Social Emotional Learning, Sergeant Eric Knox, Baltimore County Police Department, Dr. Jennifer Mullenix, Executive Director of Schools, Elementary, Dr. Sharonda Gregory, Executive Director of Schools, Elementary, Ms. Kyria Joseph, Executive Director of Schools, High Schools, Ms. Larissa Santos, Executive Director of Schools, Middle Schools, Ms. Sue Hahn, Program Specialist, Family and Community Outreach. I would also like to recognize Captain Will Buckingham from the Baltimore County Police Department and Mr. Michael Sy, Coordinator, System-Wide Athletics. So the format for this evening, we will spend approximately 15 minutes providing information and resources, and then 45 minutes with questions that are submitted in advance and taken from the YouTube chat from tonight. Our work in promoting safe and supportive learning environments is framed by federal and state laws, board policies and rules concerning student responsibilities and conduct, our strategic plan, the compass, and the student handbook and code of conduct, which students and parents receive annually. Dr. Candace Taylor, Safety Manager, will now share information about our work to enhance school safety. Dr. Taylor?
Thank you, Dr. Zarchin, and good evening, everyone. This slide provides specific information regarding the BCPS plan to enhance safety in our schools based on student needs, staff input, and stakeholder feedback. Implementation is well underway, and we continue sharing ongoing communication with the BCPS community regarding expectations and mutual support of our schools. Upgrades have been focused on increased human resources, implementation, communication, and consistent application of our existing policies, additional opportunities to provide direct student support, and proactive training and skill building for staff and students. Next slide, please. FY23 Budget Priorities Principal Survey identified safety assistance as the third most frequently requested support for the year. We are pleased to report that through the use of grant funds, we were able to hire more than 140 safety assistants and move to full implementation in all secondary schools this fall. Our safety assistants were equitably allotted based on school enrollment, received summer and fall professional and development that included team BCPS expectations, their school expectations, and participation in 70 hours of training provided by the Maryland Center for School Safety. And our safety assistants focus on maintaining a safe and supportive environment through a proactive presence while responding to emergent needs. In addition to school coverage, our safety assistants are providing support at athletic events and other large gatherings. Our next steps include creating an elementary cluster model of support. These positions support school teams and SROs in partnership with the Office of School Safety and School Administration. Sergeant Knox.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. The Baltimore County Police Department, in partnership with Baltimore County Public Schools, continues to be a collaborative relationship with both agencies to support our vision of a safe school environment. There are currently 82 SROs with a push to add 3 to 4 additional floater SROs to be deployed throughout Baltimore County when the need arises, serving in middle and high schools and rotating among elementary schools in Baltimore County. Their approach to safety is both proactive and responsive. They strive for and value the opportunity and advantages of building positive relationships with students, and many of our SROs are involved in coaching and participate in other extracurricular activities inside of our schools. Dr. Zarchin.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor and Sergeant Knox. I would now like to welcome Ms. Kyria Joseph and Ms. Larissa Santos to share information on the work of schools to foster safe and positive learning environments.
Thank you, Dr. Zarchin. As Dr. Williams stated earlier, this summer was focused on communication and collaboration. Team BCPS worked with stakeholders, school leaders, union partners to update guidance for family and students. The Office of Communications created the Back to BCPS campaign to keep Team BCPS informed about our progress and expectations, and schools share these expectations at the beginning of the school year with our students. We will continue to share information as we update our resources and website for families to stay connected. Next slide, please. As you know, all BCPS students are responsible for adhering to the BCPS Code of Student Conduct. The BCPS Code of Student Conduct provides a framework for acceptable behavior. The Student Handbook does an excellent job of informing students of those behaviors that constitute a code of conduct violation. The behaviors are listed in 3 categories ranging from minor to serious. The more serious violations are met with more serious consequences. The BCPS Code of Conduct at a glance provides consistency in implementing those consequences for our schools. Data is reviewed weekly to ensure consistency and identify areas in need of additional support. Ms. Joseph?
Thank you, Ms. Santos. Each of our 174 schools in our system are required to develop a school-wide behavior plan and have it posted on their website. These plans focus on prevention, logical consequences, and then restoration. Systems, structures, the behavior handbook, and clear expectations are put in place to prevent behavior from happening. However, if behaviors occur at school or on the bus, logical consequences are provided. These consequences could range from a mandatory parent conference to a long-term suspension, depending on the severity of the infraction and the given situation. Consequences are not a one-size-fits-all. A variety of data sources go into the determination of the consequence. For example, has the student had other behaviors, and what consequences have not worked in the past? What additional behavior support is the student receiving? And lastly, once the consequence is served, restoration must take place to repair the relationship with the school community. Let me be clear, restoration happens after a consequence has been put in place and not in place of it. Next slide, please. Bullying and harassment is taken very seriously in BCPS, and thus there is a policy and rule around this. In Superintendent's Rule 5580, bullying is defined as an unwanted, demeaning behavior among students that involves a real or perceived power imbalance. The behavior is repeated or is highly likely to be repeated over time. To be considered bullying, the behavior must be intentional and include, number 1, an imbalance or perceived imbalance of power. Students who bully use their physical, their emotional, social, or academic power to control and exude or harm others. Number 2, repetition. Bullying behaviors happen more than once and are highly likely to be repeated based on evidence gathered. All staff are required to participate in professional learning so that they are able to recognize and respond to incidents of bullying, harassment, or intimidation. Students and parents have several ways to report these incidents, including on paper, using an electronic form, or entering directly in Focus. Once notified per Rule 5580, staff take steps to notify parents, investigate the allegations, assign consequences as appropriate, and communicate the outcome to parents.
Thank you very much. Before we proceed, I want to apologize and acknowledge we're experiencing a delay as we transition slides in the PowerPoint. Apparently YouTube is not picking them up as quickly as we're seeing them. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Dr. Taylor will now provide a snapshot of the data.
So, what is happening in terms of student behavior? We continue to see inappropriate student behaviors that we address. Except for grade 6, there has been improvement in all behaviors in all grades over last year. As you can see, we are tracking and responding to aggressive behaviors. 99% of aggressive behaviors have led to out-of-school suspensions and are subject to serious school and legal consequences. These behaviors occur most commonly in grades 6 to 8, followed by grades 9 and 10. Unfortunately, we are seeing an uptake in disruptive adult behaviors on school grounds and in our communities. This is one of the places where adults can help. Much of what we see in the school originates in our communities, on social media, and as a result of TikTok challenges. We encourage parents to talk to their children about responsible use and participations. We have also seen inappropriate behaviors on the bus and have tracked 73 electronic referrals to date. As with all behaviors, consequences for inappropriate bus behavior are handled in alignment with bus expectations and our student code of conduct. Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. The graphic that's shown on the screen describes the components necessary for creating a positive school climate where behavior is concerned. As you can see, the components are prevention, logical consequences, and restoration. It is our primary goal to prevent unwanted behaviors by setting behavioral expectations that create a safe and positive school climate. When a student fails to meet behavioral expectations and violates the student code of conduct, logical consequences are provided based upon the infraction to deter further unwanted behaviors. Once the student has completed their disciplinary consequence, restoration into the school community can take place to assist with reintegration into the classroom. When conflicts occur in the community, the Conflict Resolution Center of Baltimore County offers voluntary community conferences that allows people in conflict to come together to have a conversation with each other. These formal conferences are structured problem-solving meetings between individuals who've been affected or harmed, the persons who caused the harm, and supporters of both parties. The harm may include a serious conflict, rumors, vandalism, burglary, an ongoing conflict, or physical harm. Formal conferences explore what the people who have been affected, and hopefully they work towards repairing the harm that has resulted. The contact information for the Conflict Resolution Center can be found on the screen, as well as their website. Next slide.
Thank you, Ms. Ferguson. Ms. Suhan will now share information on our partnerships and community engagement efforts.
So may I emphasize that word community. It takes all of us working together in partnership to support our schools. We know from research that our students are much more likely to succeed when schools, families, and communities work together as partners to support student learning and emotional health. BCPS receives support from many partners, and this summer we hosted a partnership fair where community stakeholders came together to discuss how they could support our students and our families. It was an opportunity to meet each other face to face and to connect. In September, the very first partnership newsletter was shared. We will continue regular and deliberate outreach to bring our community leaders, our volunteers, and our mentors into the school buildings to support our students. Partnerships provide positive experiences and support for students. There are many opportunities to get involved with BCPS. And if you would like to learn more, just search Family and Community Engagement on the BCPS website. You will find a partnership form and information about volunteering. Dr. Zarshan?
Thank you, Ms. Hahn. At this time, we are moving to our question and answer portion of tonight's town hall. As a reminder, members of the BCPS community had an opportunity to submit questions in advance, and we received a number of questions. We are also going to answer some questions that you, the viewers, submit in the chat box. We will do our best to get to as many questions as possible. I do want to share that we will not be able to answer questions about specific incidents, students, or staff. We also ask that our community be respectful when engaging in conversations in the chat box. To kick off this portion of the evening, our panelists will answer some of the most frequently asked questions we receive from parents and the BCPS community. Ms. Santos, the first question is for you. And to our other panelists, please feel free to jump in at any time. So the first question, why can't schools share specific disciplinary outcomes?
Thank you, Dr. Zarshan. This is a question that we're often asked as executive directors when we speak to parents and guardians when a situation occurs in a school. The type and amount of information that a school can share and with whom is guided by federal law. Schools are required to maintain confidentiality as it pertains to student records, and a student's discipline record falls under this guidance. What schools can do is direct parents to the Student Code of Conduct, which serves as a guide for schools in addressing disciplinary infractions.
Thank you. Ms. Joseph, the community wants to know why they get details from the news media or police before BCPS.
At times in certain investigations, the police are driving those investigations, and so we have to take their directive and they provide the details. The news media, as they do, they often take certain clips, and so we can't control the news media. But again, when we have investigations and the police are guiding those investigations, they are the first to release the information, and they provide guidance for us on when we can release the information and what type of information can be released.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. Ms. Santos, the next question is, why can't disruptive students be removed from the bus?
Thank you, Dr. Zarshan. I think that this is a misconception held by members of our community. Riding the school bus is a privilege, and this is a privilege that may be temporarily denied or even permanently revoked if a student's behavior jeopardizes the safe operation of the school bus or the safety of students riding the bus. In addition to removing the privilege, additional school discipline, such as suspension, is also possible depending on the infraction. We're often asked about video and digital cameras and audio recording devices. Our school buses are equipped with video and digital cameras and audio recording devices. These tools monitor the passenger area of the bus. As such, students are subject to audio and video surveillance. The objective is to provide an important additional tool to assist the driver and administration in managing student conduct on school buses as an important safety consideration that benefits all.
Thank you, Ms. Santos. The next question I'm going to ask Ms. Joseph and Dr. Taylor to respond to. And the question is, what happens when adults participate in disruptive behavior with their children or family?
I'll go first, Dr. Taylor. Unfortunately, when we have adults and families of the children who participate in disruptive behavior, we have had to issue no trespassing letters, and sometimes it's just for the school. Sometimes, depending on the behavior, it's for all of BCPS. Our law enforcement and police officers have had to press charges against adults and their families for the disruptive behavior, and some have been arrested for those disruptions. And that's the unfortunate part. Susan Hahn talked about community, and this is where we really need to come together as a community, and our adults are following those behaviors. You are modeling for students and for our children. And so unfortunately, this year in particular, in the first 6 weeks of school, we have seen a significant increase in inappropriate adult behavior that is disruptive for our school environments. Dr. Taylor? Dr. Taylor, you're on mute.
I apologize. I just wanted to add that those behaviors not only disrupt the school, they are disruptive to your child and the children that are in that school building, because it takes away resources to address that adult behavior that could be better spent on students. So we encourage parents, and a large majority of our parents show up. They are active and engaged in participating positively with the school community. We encourage parents to model the behavior that you are expecting other students as well as your child to display in that environment.
Ms. Joseph and Dr. Taylor, thank you for your response. Ms. Santos, the next question, what is done differently to address students with multiple infractions?
Thank you. As stated earlier, all of our schools are expected to utilize the BCPS Code of Conduct as a guide when addressing inappropriate student behavior. However, when students choose to repeatedly engage in inappropriate behaviors, schools view the severity of the infraction, they review the individual student's needs, and work with their families in order to determine the appropriate consequence, and in some instances, the best placement for students. Our schools continually are monitoring consequences for individual behaviors in order to provide behavioral or corrective supports for our students. We are continuing to work with our school administration to ensure that there is consistency within our schools and creating a safe and supportive learning environment for our students. A lot of the strategies that are outlined in terms of our consequences can be found in our student handbook if parents are interested.
And I'd just like to add, sometimes when we have multiple infractions, sometimes it's a long-term suspension. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we have to move to a long-term or short-term suspension, a long-term suspension. At times, we can work with our Educational Options Office to provide another setting for that. Students, at times as executive directors working with the families, we have to do administrative transfers to other schools to allow a fresh start for that student and their family. So we're constantly looking at the data, and we're looking to see, is the consequence, does it have an impact on the action? And if it doesn't, we're moving to the next layer of what we can offer, all while trying to make sure that the students are being educated. But there are times where that environment has to move, and we go ahead and do those things.
Thank you. Ms. Joseph, I'm going to ask that you respond to the next frequently asked question, which is, why do schools use restorative practices? And then the comment, they do not appear to work.
Yeah. So we talked about restorative practices don't work in isolation. They actually work after a consequence is in place. And so I'll give you an example. We have a student and they may have a certain situation, and we do a short-term suspension. We'll do the restorative practice right before they come back to make sure that whoever they had that conflict with, there is a mediation in place. That is considered a restorative practice. It usually happens after a consequence is in place. Earlier, Ms. Ferguson talked about families, because we have groups of families that have conflict. And so we'll use conflict resolution. While that's not handled in the school, outside of the school, that is a restorative practice. And so the restorative practices work after consequence is in place, and it is meant to repair the relationship once the students return and once the families come back into the school setting.
Thank you.
If I may interject, I want to circle back on that a little bit, Ms. Santos and Ms. Joseph. You've both been former high school principals, and you know the impact. So you have restorative practices, you think things are resolved, but then situations happen again. Talk a little bit about, from your perspective, how that continues, either with the cell phones or social media. Just talk a little bit about some of that. We do these things to restore, but yet sometimes situations continue to fester. Just talk briefly a little bit from your experience.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Ms. Joseph.
No, you go ahead, ma'am. You go right ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Yes, unfortunately, sometimes social media plays a huge role in the disruption in our school buildings. As administrators, we do bring students together, and we do attempt to help them resolve their conflict. And, we engage our social worker, our school psychologist, our counselors, our administrative team, additional resources that we have in the school. And then somebody will post something on social media, and all of a sudden, all that work is undone. And students are using social media as a vehicle to engage students in non-productive behaviors. Ms. Joseph?
You answered it perfectly. Okay.
All right, if we're ready to move forward, our last frequently asked question. And Ms. Santos, you've got this one. A parent wants to know why we can't put students who are disruptive in alternative school and let them stay there.
Well, alternative school settings were never meant to be permanent places for all students. Every student has a right to a free, appropriate public education and to receive that education in the least restrictive environment. As we know, our alternative schools are often smaller settings for students. They offer the opportunity for our students to address a variety of issues. It's important to note that students don't just attend these schools for behavioral reasons. There are a variety of reasons why a student may go to an alternative placement. While students are there, faculty and staff monitor each student's progress to determine the length and appropriateness of the placement, always with the goal of returning the student to the comprehensive school setting, because that is the least restrictive environment.
Thank you. At this point, we will answer additional questions submitted in advance and in the chat box. So this is a question for our executive directors. A parent wants to know, why is BCPS allowing a small minority of students to create unsafe and unstable environments within our schools that is negatively impacting educators' ability to teach and students' ability to learn?
I can take this one. And so we are addressing these spontaneous activities that are negative with those students. We are implementing consequences from local suspensions, which the principal holds, to what we would call a board suspension, where a designee has to determine the placement for those students. And we are working with the families, talking to other districts just to understand why we're seeing such the spontaneity of some of these instances with these students. And we're seeing a large amount of things are community-based, meaning things happen over the summer and they are bringing it back to the schoolhouse. As we're investigating, they have multiple layers to them. And so we're finding those things out. And so we are addressing them quickly. We are addressing violent behavior very quickly with multiple resources, which has to sometimes include our law enforcement partners.
Thank you. Ms. Joseph, I'm going to turn this one to you as well. A parent on YouTube states, you keep saying you want the community to get involved to improve school discipline. What specifically do you want them to do? What are they allowed to do?
Sure, and I'm so glad that you asked that question. A few weeks ago, we had a community partnership fair where we asked all kind of organizations and just individuals to come out and to be an organized partner, and you could select the school that you wanted to partner with. We have organizations that are providing resources for our students. We have organizations and individuals who are trying to do mentoring. If that is too much, you can work with your PTA, and maybe your work schedule is a lot, but there is something that you can do to support the school. We have PTAs who are focused on helping with events. One of the things our students are telling us is that they want the focus to be on them. They want to have events. We worked really hard to make sure that we have full athletic programs offered, that we have after-school programs offered on all levels. And our students are saying they don't want these, some of the students to be a distraction to that. And so that is a way that you can partner with schools, and also encouraging just your child to make sure that they are active. Research says that students who are very engaged in their school usually meet with success. So making sure that your child is engaged in the activity, no matter what their love or passion is, BCPS has something for them. That is a way to partner with the school.
Thank you. This next question was submitted in advance by a parent, and I would like one of our EDs to address. How can BCPS disclose how students are disciplined while maintaining privacy standards for minors? Communities need to be reassured that issues are addressed in a timely manner.
I'll take this one, Ms. Joseph. As stated earlier, schools are governed by what type of information that we can share. When there are major incidents, schools work with the Office of Communications and the executive directors from the Department of Schools to support maintaining open lines of communications with our communities. When appropriate, schools will send notifications to their communities, informing them of overarching issues or trends that we're seeing, such as the TikTok challenges, as well as provide them with an overview of the outcome of the investigation. And again, that's working in conjunction with our BCPD partners to ensure that we aren't impeding any of their investigations.
Thank you. And this question is from our YouTube for our EDs. I think some kids are posting videos of fights on social media, which encourages more fights. Can we just not allow phones in school?
So very glad you asked that. We have a cell phone policy. We sent it out this summer. We made sure that the families were aware. There was a collaborative effort to create that policy, and they are not to have them in the schoolhouse. There are certain times on the high school level, which should be during the lunchtime. But as parents, most of the time, the parents pay the bill. So perhaps a suggestion could be to monitor the social media that your child is engaging in. Several phones have that aspect. And so that is something that we are challenged with. I think earlier we talked about the different TikTok challenges that are there, different websites, but you can go on your child's phone and see what content and what website that they're on, and then have a discussion with them for that particular content. But we do have a cell phone policy. And if you're not aware of it, please call your child's principal or their school, and they can give that information. And the policy is on our website, and you can see it there.
I just want to add on to that, Ms. Joseph, that in many of our schools, our principals have gotten savvy as to how parents can limit the availability of certain apps during the school day. I know as an executive director for middle schools, many of my principals have been discussing that and sharing those strategies with parents as they call when cell phones are an issue. In addition, some of our schools have started to use different strategies to address repeat offenders when it comes to violations of the cell phone policy, such as a yonder bag, which will allow the student to lock up their cell phone but keep it with them throughout the day.
And then one last thing, parents, when you see that information, please share it with the principal so that we become aware, so that they can then put some things in place. So that's another way to partner with the school, make them aware. You can do that anonymously if you're not comfortable with that, but make the school aware of what you're seeing on social media.
And I wanted to add from Parent University that we do offer a presentation several times a year on internet safety, because sometimes parents can't figure out those phones as well as the kids can. So we have a presenter who's very tech savvy and helps parents figure that out.
All right, thanks to each of you. Dr. Taylor and Sergeant Knox, a parent on YouTube asks, why are disruptive adults being allowed to come into the building? What legal consequences do they face?
And I'll start. We always want our parents, as we shared earlier, to model for students. Some of the consequences and policies that are in place for disruptive parents are no trespass letters, warning letters, and ultimately, if the behavior exceeds that aspect, law enforcement unfortunately is involved, and that in itself is disruptive to the environment. We've talked about this, the uptick in disruptive parents, and as I've shared earlier, it displaces resources that we need for our children, for the students that are in the building. So we implore our parents to show up for our students, but show up in a manner that is respectful and conducive to the learning environment. Now we all know, I mean, not we all know, but as parents, we love our children to no end. And we are want our children to be safe. And so I know that sometimes we can go to 1,000 for our children, but we need to be mindful that your child, as well as other children, are impacted when you cannot control your actions and your behavior, which then will cause the school system and subsequently Baltimore County Police Department to get involved. And I'll defer to Sergeant Knox.
So I'll just speak on this. Disruptive parents are not allowed in the school building, and I can make that very clear. Parents make it into the building acting like they should, and they let their emotions drive them. And I'll speak on, as a police officer for well over 2 decades and as a father of a 17-year-old in the school system, I too cannot let my emotions drive me in a situation. Clearly, even when he's a victim of some behavior, I have to allow and trust the school system to investigate, to levy consequences that I may not know about, and I have to trust that they have my son's best interest, which I do. So clearly, any parent that makes it into a building that acts out or acts in a disenfranchised way will be addressed by school resource officers, and the behavior will be stopped immediately, but they're not allowed in school buildings in Baltimore County Public Schools.
Thank you, Sergeant Knox and Dr. Taylor. The next question is for our executive directors. Can you please clarify what the triage for messaging is when there's a school safety issue the public and guardians or parents need to be aware of? Is there a process for communication? Some of the inconsistency is adding confusion regarding the intensity of an issue and exactly what happens.
So yes. Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, we do have. Thank you. We do have a communication process that we have. When there is an emergency, the principal will reach out to us as executive directors and our safety manager, and they will alert us that there is an incident occurring, all while trying to actually manage the incident. But in this age that we're in, as you all know, all students have phones, and sometimes they text out information while we're trying to gather to make sure that all of the information that we are presenting to you is accurate. And we have an approval process to make sure that it is accurate. If the investigation or what is occurring involves a police investigation, again, we take their directive on what can be sent out. And so a lot of times we are just not as fast as a child texting as parents want us to be. We ask that you follow what is sent out by BCPS, or if the police are putting the information, by the police, not by Facebook groups, though that's where information is not accurate, so that you're getting the accurate information that is in place. And so, yes, we do have a communication protocol. We try to make sure that it is accurate. We do try to make sure that it is very timely and it goes through the appropriate approval process.
And just to add on that, Ms. Joseph, it's important, parents and guardians, to trust the school in that they are communicating important information. They are investigating serious incidents and all allegations. And I think that trusting that we are going to inform you when an incident does occur. And students sometimes, again, as Ms. Joseph stated, sharing misinformation, and then that causes even further disruptions within our school building and takes away from the opportunity and the time that administration, our SROs, and our safety managers need to be able to resolve the situation quickly, and to be able to communicate that quickly with our families.
I also wanted to add, parents, please make sure that your accurate numbers are in our system, because sometimes the numbers are not correct and you're not getting the message, the information. But you can also, if you have additional concerns, again, please call the school, but make sure that your information is accurate in the system, and just call us if you need more assistance.
And again, speaking as a parent, with my own children in the school system, if you have a concern, please reach out to us. We're parents. We understand the parent perspective as well. We're here to partner with you. We're here to address any of your concerns and make sure that your child has a positive school experience.
Thank you. We have another question from YouTube for our executive directors. The range of consequences is too broad. How do we know that serious problems are being given serious consequences as opposed to something on the lower end of the range of consequences?
So our what we actually offer, we do have a broad range of consequences. That's a good thing, depending on what it is. If it's something that is violent, disruptive behavior, we said over and over again, we have what we call short-term suspensions. We have long-term suspensions. Within that long-term suspension, again, there can be multiple ways. We have to educate students, but where and those locations, that is where the broad range is there. And so we do have those consequences in place for that violent behavior. You're going to see days out of school. How long and where you return is where we work with our partners within the school system to determine.
Thank you. So we have another YouTube question for our executive directors. Are disciplinary decisions based on equity?
So I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Santos.
Disciplinary decisions are based on the infractions. So each individual student, their needs, their educational program, previous infractions, information that we know, the seriousness of the infraction, that's what determines the consequence that students are given. You know, and to add on in terms of ensuring that schools are following the code of conduct, the executive directors are tasked with monitoring both our discipline and our bus referrals to ensure consistency. On a weekly basis, we're reaching out to our schools and having discussions and communications. We're looking at our data, again, to ensure that that code of conduct is being followed and that allegations and infractions are being addressed and being addressed appropriately.
Thank you. This question is open to the entire panel because I know there have been several enhancements to our plans that address the school day and after-school activities. A parent on YouTube states, "This plan is the same that was presented last year. The plan was not enough to stop the extreme fighting. What else is going to be done so that the fighting doesn't happen in the school building?" Mr. Sy, if you could speak to athletic enhancements as part of the response, that would be appreciated.
Not a problem, Dr. Zarchin. So as we know, our athletic programs are extremely important to the fabric of our community and to our student athletes. So to take a proactive approach, we wanted to put in some procedures to make sure that we're providing the safest experience for both our student athletes and our communities. We also realize that the partnership is extremely important as well, as we want a partnership with the parents and realizing that they play an important role in terms of making sure that these events are safe. So we looked at such things as adding additional staff to our games, using our electronic ticketing system to make sure that we have attracted a number of people that are at our events, increasing security, making sure that we are making announcements during the games, providing more staff, and having rules put in place regarding bags being brought to games to make sure that there's nothing being brought in that could possibly harm someone, including in terms of the kids bringing in food and drink and not knowing what's in the bottles and how that could ultimately impact behavior at games. So we take it very seriously. At the end of the day, we just want to make sure our kids get home safely after our events. And then also asking our parents to be there on time to pick their kids up to provide them a safe way home. So again, we realize that athletics is just so important to our student athletes, especially coming off of the COVID pandemic. We're back with our kids participating, and we just want to make sure that we provide the safest environment for our student athletes.
Thank you, Mr. Sy.
We also added 140 safety assistants. That is a difference. We have consistency in our monitoring. We have clear bus expectations. That is a difference. We have a cell phone policy that we put out. That is a difference. We, as Ms. Ferguson said, we actually have more counselors in place. That is a difference. We are doing removals from the bus. That is a difference. And in the athletics, we also put something in place so that more students can participate by allowing our juniors on the JV to increase participation. We have more after-school activities offered this year. Last year, we were coming off of COVID. This year, we made sure, and we're very thankful and grateful to our teachers who are serving as sponsors. We made sure that we have the most after-school programs that we can have to make sure that our students are engaged. All of those are different actions that we put in place for this year.
Thank you for that. Dr. Taylor and the executive directors, a parent wants to know whether students and parents are held accountable for the destruction of property. For example, during a fight in the bathroom at a high school, a sink was ripped off the wall and water leaked. Who is charged for this repair?
And I'll start first. I know that as a former principal that parents and students were charged for destruction of property. What tends to happen, though, is that property is servicing other students. So Baltimore County has to immediately fix that broken, I believe you said broken sink in the bathroom, because that creates a disruption in the school related to where students have access to using the restroom. So parents and students are held accountable, but Baltimore County does have to step in immediately to address those types of activities.
What often happens in those situations, I'll add on, again, as a former high school principal, in those situations, we work with our facilities office as well as our building service workers to identify the cost of the replacement. And then we do expect families to pay restitution for the damage that was done.
Along the same lines, a parent on YouTube also wants to know if there's a general approach for behavior in bathrooms. This parent reports hearing about troubling student behaviors that take place in school bathrooms.
And so we do have, because we have the additional safety assistance, we're able to monitor movement throughout the building. And if any parents are hearing that, please contact the school so that they can know if their behavior, so that we can then put additional monitoring in that place. In high schools, they're very large. So if you know that something is happening on the third floor around third period, let the school know so that we can then put additional monitoring in that area. And that's one way we use our safety assistance.
All right, another question or comment from YouTube. Question is, could the panelists please elaborate on the process for handling bullying reports? Would it be effective if the reports were handled expeditiously?
Yes, as soon as you know we need you to report it, you can do it on paper. You can do it in our focus system, but we just need to actually be aware of the situation, not after something happens. And so if you contact the school, they can take you through the process if you're unsure of what the paper process looks like and what the focus process looks like, or just call the school and let them know, and they can walk you through how to document. Once you document it, we are required to follow through with an investigation. We are required to give you a written response on our investigation. We are required to do that.
Thank you. Another YouTube question. At what point will our current disciplinary policies be reevaluated? What data is being referenced to determine if the current policies are effective?
So as stated earlier, one of the big push this summer was to collaborate with our stakeholders, with our union representatives, with our administrators, in order to receive feedback on the effectiveness of our discipline policies and whatever changes were recommended. We use COMAR regulations and federal government regulations to determine our discipline policies. And we are constantly monitoring our data as well to determine the effectiveness of some of the discipline consequences that we've instituted within our school building. As Ms. Joseph has stated before, many of the consequences range from parent conference to long-term suspensions, short-term suspensions. In some situations, we have schools that have in-school suspension or an alternative learning center that can also be utilized. Many of our schools are utilizing their MTSS, which are multi-tiered system support teachers, which are placed in schools to help with monitoring student behaviors, going into classrooms and gathering data, meeting with administrative teams, and all that feedback and work goes through Ms. Ferguson's office, and they partner along with the executive directors and various offices within BCPS to evaluate our policies and determine their effectiveness.
And we also listen to our students. We have our student government, where they provide feedback to us. We have a student board member. So our students are a big stakeholder in that feedback as well.
Okay,
Thank you for that. Our
Dr.
next
Sargent,
question. Oh,
Dr.
go ahead.
Sargent, I want you to go back, because in the presentation, I'm gonna go back to that presentation about the discipline policy. And I think Ms. Santos referenced this. We're governed by laws. So discipline is affiliated with our COMAR. And so we just can't come up with policies and change policies that are dictated to law. So it's the law, is our policy, and then it's the implementation. So I'm going to go back. You had a screen that had like a triangle of some sort, but I think that was a good reference about policies. There you go, guiding the work. You have a state and federal law, and then you have the board policies, and then how we implement the policies, which are the superintendent's rules. And so I know there were conversations about alternatives and zero tolerance. Well, I don't remember the year, but it's been a while that law decided we are no longer, as a state, doing zero tolerance, unless it is one of those, unless we're talking about a weapon or something dangerous that we then turn it over to the police. So we hear this a lot that, and I see Ms. Henn is I can see her, she probably want to chime in. We are governed by the law, and the board developed those policies within the law, and then we implement. But Ms. Henn, do you want to add a few things around this statement?
Yes, and thank you, Dr. Williams, and thank you for going back to our triangle graphic here. That is helpful because we are governed by federal, followed by state law, followed by COMAR. And I did want to mention that the state board has a public input process that our community can contribute to as well, where they regularly review, just like the board reviews policies and hears from our public. The state board also hears from the public, and they consider, they have a longer public input period on COMAR regulations, and they are actually considering the second half of their regulations as it relates to discipline. Right now, I believe it opens in July. So if anyone has feedback that they want to provide on those discipline regulations, that period will be opening up this summer. So that's an opportunity to provide feedback for that. But like Dr. Williams said, we are governed by those laws and those regulations. It's a box, if you will, that we have to operate within that box. And not to say that that can't change or that there aren't opportunities to shape that, because there absolutely are, and opportunities to provide feedback. But those policies are not developed, as others have said, in a vacuum. We operate within those, and the board develops policies within those. So those are our parameters, and the board is looking at our policies, specifically 5550, 5560, two being the specific policies around discipline, and taking a look at that. But those are some parameters we operate under.
Thank you very much. That's helpful.
Thank you.
So we have reached our last question, and I believe that Ms. Ferguson may be the best person to respond to this. How many student conduct hearing officers are there in our system? How quickly is the process to remove a repeat disruptive or violent student from their home school?
Thank you for that question, Dr. Zarchin. Currently, we have 3 student conduct hearing officers. They are assigned to the Central Zone, the West Zone, and the East Zone. And as soon as a student demonstrates a behavior that meets the threshold of having to be removed out of school and referred to the student conduct hearing officer, they are removed out of school at that time. Then the student conduct hearing officer is required to hold a hearing to hear the case around whether or not that's what that student's punishment will be, how long that student will be out of school. So the removal is immediate. The extent of that removal happens once the student conduct hearing officer has the conversation with all parties involved. That includes the student, the student's family, as well as representatives from the school.
Thank you very much. So as we wrap up, I'd like to provide Dr. Williams with an opportunity to make closing remarks before we end tonight's event. Dr. Williams?
So again, I want to thank our participants, our panel, and our viewers, our family members, I mean, possibly even students, for attending this virtual town hall meeting. And please continue to work with our schools and our school community. Thank you for partnering with us as we work together to support all of our students and support student success.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. I want to thank each of our presenters. We hope that everyone found the information that we shared useful. Thank you for joining us. As a reminder, these virtual town hall conversations are just one step in our ongoing efforts. Please continue to work directly with your school leadership teams to collaborate on positive solutions for the school and the community. Our partnership is critical during these challenging times. Thank you for your ongoing support. I hope you have a great evening. Thank you again for joining us.